President Trump says the U.S. is imposing an additional 100% tariff on imports from China starting November 1st.
The stock market plunging nearly 900 points at the close after President Trump's new threat to China tonight, a 100% tariff on Chinese imports. What the president is furious about. The Dow closing down 878 points, the Nasdaq down 820, the S&P 500 down 182 points.
So, we've got a situation. China just announced export controls on rare earth minerals. The stuff in your phone, your car, military equipment. They control 90% of the global supply. The response? Threats of 100% tariffs on all Chinese goods. Markets tanked 800 points in minutes. Small business owners watching their costs double overnight. And American farmers? Still waiting for China to buy their soybeans, except China's buying from Brazil now. This is the trade war everyone said would be easy to win. Spoiler, nobody's winning. What we're watching is two economic superpowers playing chicken with the global economy. China's got leverage, alternatives, and a long memory. Meanwhile, American consumers are footing the bill for a war they didn't sign up for. This isn't political theater anymore. This is economics catching up with ideology, and it's getting expensive. Welcome back to Mind Mirror. Today we're breaking down the China-USA trade standoff that's making everything cost more, and why the people who cheered loudest are getting hit hardest. Let's get into it.
It turns out that the trade war has casualties. And the casualty is not China. It's Trump's own voters. Fox News aired a segment this week that sort of accidentally did what we might marginally call journalism, because they featured a small business owner who used to pay $26,000 in tariffs on imports from China and now is paying a lot more. Here's Fox News referencing a New York Post article. Take a listen to this.
There's an item in the New York Post that we all have in front of us. It's an exclusive story, and it talks about how with these 104% tariffs that went into effect, we think that China is going to have to pay for it, but it tells a story of a special needs toy importer. And when the tariffs went into effect at midnight, his tariff, he's been paying a tariff because he gets stuff from China, $26,000 a year. His tariff bill,
$26,000. Let that number sit for a second. That's what this small business owner was already paying before the 104% tariff hit. Not China, him, the American importer of special needs toys. Now do the math. 104% means his tariff bill just jumped to potentially $50,000 plus annually. That's not a tax on China, that's a tax on his business. The Chinese factory still gets paid the same amount. They're fine. It's this guy who's bleeding. And here's what a lot of voters never understood. Tariffs are paid by importers, not exporters. When politicians said China will pay, they were either lying or didn't understand basic trade policy. Either way, American businesses foot the bill. For a while, people didn't connect the dots. Prices went up slowly. Businesses absorbed costs. But there's a breaking point, and we're watching people hit it in real time. This isn't some Wall Street investor we're talking about. This is a guy importing toys for kids with special needs. Those are the casualties of ideological economics. When policy meets reality, reality always wins.
Listen up, people. We've got a breaking news report. Donald Trump has put 100% tariffs on China starting on November the 1st. And this completely wiped out the crypto market with the biggest sell-off in one daily candle ever. It's time to buy. Also, major US indices like the Nasdaq sold off and corrected by 1,000 points. During World War II, you had the Pearl Harbor event where Japan come and attacked America and wiped out their Navy fleet. This was due to an oil embargo. So when we look at these 100% tariffs on China by Donald Trump, we could potentially trigger a Pearl Harbor moment that may materialize as taking over Taiwan and gaining control of all the microchips. These are the most precarious times in this world not seen since World War II. What are you saying, people? Follow for breaking news updates. But
you asked for it, you got it. The VIX, 21 and change. Trump's jawboning China again, and that creates more volatility. And we're going to see that. But the market was looking for an excuse for something to sell off. It was doing too much. And so now we have it. And you'll probably see it over the next couple of days play out. And the intensification of the shutdown starts to gather that fever pitch. Just pay attention. I'm watching. You watching? Good. No, we both watching. We good.
Airballs, what happened with NAS just a few minutes ago?
A single social media post. NASDAQ drops 800 points in minutes. Let me tell you why that should terrify you, even if you don't own stocks. Markets run on predictability. Businesses need to know what's coming so they can plan, invest, hire. But when policy gets announced via social media with zero warning, zero strategy, zero consistency, chaos follows. Every time this happens, it's not just billionaires losing money. It's your 401k taking a hit, your retirement fund shrinking, your kids' college savings evaporating. But the real damage? Long-term. Companies won't expand if they don't know whether a tweet will crash their sector tomorrow. Jobs don't get created. Investments don't get made. We were promised business expertise would bring stability. Instead, we got volatility as policy. Economic strategy by impulse. You can't run a $28 trillion economy on social media announcements and gut feelings. Turns out that actually matters.
We saw this bullish structure this morning. We honestly thought we were going to get some nice buys from here, but Trump put out a tweet and we saw the market drop over 800 points. I really hope that you guys are preserving your accounts. Let me show you what happened. So here's a tweet that Trump sent out about China and him and other parts of the world having conversation. And just this tweet alone made NAS drop over 800 points. So guys, be careful with your accounts. Make sure that you are putting a stop loss. Make sure that you're using proper risk management, because a move like that, especially if you're using proper counts, it can blow the account.
Okay, we have breaking news. The stock market's absolutely tanking today. What is going on? President Trump posted on social media that he's considering a massive increase of tariffs on Chinese products coming into the U.S. I'm just a bit confused because the last time we had tariff news, SPY dropped all the way down to lows of 500 and then recovered and ran all the way to all-time highs and beyond. So I thought we were past the tariffs, but I guess they're back. By the way, this chart behind me, that big red candle right there, that's today's price action. And look at all of the other red candles before that. We have not had a red day this big since, what is this, April of this year. So I guess my question to you is this a dip buy opportunity just like this was down here? Are we buying the dip or are we going to short stocks and start selling? You let me know. Drop it down in the comments below. Are we buying or selling?
Here's what gets me. This isn't a surprise. Tariffs were promised on the campaign trail. They happened before. Everyone knew this was coming. Yet markets are reacting like it's breaking news. That tells you something crucial. Even supporters didn't think the follow-through would be this aggressive. They thought it was negotiating tactics, bluffing, theater. But there's no bluffing here, and now we're all paying the price for assuming there would be. Here's the uncomfortable truth. We import from China because it's economically efficient, not because we're weak or stupid. Because specialization works. China makes electronics, we make software. Brazil grows soybeans. Everyone wins through trade. The second you try forcing economic nationalism, you're fighting economics itself, and economics doesn't care about your feelings or your politics. So, is this a buying opportunity? Maybe if you think there'll be a policy reversal, but doubling down seems more likely than backing down. The smarter move? Diversify. Don't bet everything on an economy where policy comes via social media post.
No freaking way, guys. Kevin O'Leary, he said it, and they all laughed. CNN rolled their eyes. Wall Street called it chicken. The courts tried to shut it down. But now, President Trump's 50% tariff just hit like a freight train, and it's crushing everything in its path. Steel surging. China backed into a corner. The courts slapped down by a national emergency clause. And Kevin O'Leary, he didn't just see it coming. He actually called the end game. So today I want to share with you guys exactly how President Trump just turned a court defeat into a global dominance without even lifting a pen. The $22 billion tariff jackpot that's funding your tax cuts. China, made in 2025, their dream just got shattered in a single move. And why Kevin O'Leary is now saying that we're headed into a 10% global tariff baseline that could change trade forever. Plus, of course, how President Trump's moves just exposed Biden's autopilot presidency, put Iran.
Donald Trump's big mouth just cost him a victory in the Panama Canal, and he is going to lose his mind, especially when he sees it's China that's taking it from him. Now, a few weeks ago, Donald Trump at the joint session of Congress mentioned that an American company was buying ports from China on either end of the canal, and that America was taking back the canal. But China has now stepped in and said, not so fast. We're blocking the deal. And part of the reason they're blocking the deal is because of Donald Trump, because he talks so much about America taking over Greenland and Canada and Gaza and, of course, the Panama Canal. China says, no, we use that too. We can't let you have it. And now they're stepping in to block this deal. Donald Trump is going to absolutely flip because China is exerting its influence all thanks to him. It's his mouth, but of course, he'll blame others. He's going to blame other people for this deal falling through and for China keeping its hold on the canal. Now, it should be noted that Panama controls the canal, not China. But Donald Trump desperately wanted these ports, and it was a major victory that's gone now.
This is the perfect example of how loud rhetoric sabotages quiet wins. For weeks, we heard about American companies buying Chinese-controlled ports at the Panama Canal. Big victory for American influence, right? Then China blocked the sale. Why? Because the messaging wouldn't stop. Public threats about taking back the canal, expanding territory, seizing strategic assets. China looked at that pattern and said, yeah, we're not helping consolidate power in waterways we use. Here's what gets forgotten. Diplomacy requires subtlety. You can't broadcast territorial ambitions and expect other countries to cooperate with your strategic goals. Panama controls that canal. We gave it back in 1999. It's sovereign territory. But when leaders talk like everything's still up for grabs if you yell loud enough, other nations respond accordingly. This is what happens when foreign policy sounds like sports commentary. You get applause from supporters, but you lose actual strategic advantages. China just played this perfectly. They let the celebration happen, then pulled the rug out. Now American influence looks weaker while Chinese leverage looks stronger.
Just in, Donald Trump is imposing a 100% tariff on China because he believes that China is manipulating the market for the rare earths material. Now, he's saying that if by November 1, China doesn't play, then he will impose a 100% tariff on everything that comes in from China. This is basically the beginning of the next tariff war. And Donald Trump doesn't actually realize that if he imposes a 100% tariff on China, this will cause global chaos.
100% tariff. Let me translate what that actually means for your wallet. Something cost $100 from China, add another $100 in tariffs. Now it's $200 for everything. Your phone, your laptop, car parts, appliances, kids' toys, all doubled. American companies either pay double, find another supplier, or stop importing altogether. And guess what happens? Prices go up, way up, on everything. But here's where it escalates. China doesn't just sit there. They retaliate. They stop buying American products, soybeans, aircraft, machinery. They cut off exports of critical materials we need for manufacturing. Then other countries have to choose sides, trade with China, or follow America's lead and risk Chinese retaliation themselves. This is why it's called a trade war. Once it starts, everyone's shooting at everyone, and casualties pile up on all sides. The logic was, we'll punish China and they'll cave. But China's economy is massive, they've got alternatives, and they've been preparing for this scenario since 2018. Meanwhile, American consumers are the ones actually paying the price, not China, us.
Because if they impose a 100% tariff, then a lot of people are going to have to follow suit because Trump will most likely bully them to tariff China.
Carolyn Levitt shared a little secret about Donald Trump that just went public, not only exposing the cover-up of his health, but some of the biggest hypocrisy we have ever seen out of this administration. It is shocking. It has MAGA in a tizzy, and we are going to get into it all and call it all out. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video. And before we get into this shocking news to come out of Donald Trump's very disturbing visit, I want to start with the context of this trip and the news that was made around it before we get to this very shocking piece of information. That breakdown comes from Chris Hayes.
Donald Trump is the oldest man to ever be sworn in as president of the United States. Yes, he is older than Joe Biden was when he assumed office. And one thing we know about the presidency is that it ages people, right? I mean, you can see in the comparisons of presidents when they took office versus when they left office. And it's more than just the passage of time. They're dealing with the stress of running the most powerful country on earth. That struggle was on full display with the last president, Joe Biden, who was at the time the oldest person ever elected. And Biden was ultimately forced to drop out of his reelection bid as a result. And then the country just turned around and elected a man who, again, broke the record for the oldest person to become president. And 9 months in, I gotta say, the guy doesn't look great. He's got a reoccurring bruise on his hand. He's constantly trying to cover up with makeup. He's got severely swollen ankles, which the White House attributes to a very common condition among senior citizens. But it's more than that. Mentally, the guy seems off. He's constantly drifting off during meetings, unable to properly understand questions from reporters, rambling even more than he did during his first term. And that problem is compounded by the fact the administration is among the least transparent we've ever seen. Just take a look at this official White House announcement about the president's schedule just today. Quote, on Friday morning, President Trump will visit Walter Reed Medical Center for a planned meeting and remarks with the troops. While there, President Trump will stop by for his routine yearly checkup. He will then return to the White House. President Trump is considering going to the Middle East shortly thereafter. Wait, what was that part sandwich in the middle there? Oh, the president's going to talk to the troops at Walter Reed and, hey, while you're there, might as well pop in for the yearly checkup.
Wait, hold on. This is interesting phrasing. The White House says this is just a routine yearly checkup happening conveniently while already at Walter Reed. Except reports show the annual checkup already happened earlier this year. So either they're being misleading about what's actually happening, or there's a reason for a second unplanned medical visit they don't want to discuss. Look, transparency matters, especially regarding the health of the oldest person ever elected to the office. When the schedule suddenly includes an unannounced medical visit disguised as convenience, people notice. This matters, because leadership requires both physical and mental fitness. And when an administration known for minimal transparency suddenly needs to explain away medical visits, it raises questions. The pattern is concerning. Visible bruising, swollen ankles, drifting during meetings, rambling responses. Those aren't political attacks, they're observable facts that warrant medical attention. But instead of straightforward health updates, we get euphemisms and scheduling coincidences. That's not transparency, that's damage control.
But here's the thing, Donald Trump already had his annual checkup.
Welcome to the fucking news. I'm your host, Kellerman, and here's some of the shit going on in the world that you should probably know about. This year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to Venezuelan politician Maria Machado for her work promoting democratic rights. She dedicated the award to the people of Venezuela and U.S. President Donald Trump. In the United States, a federal grand jury indicted New York Attorney General Letitia James under suspicion of bank fraud and making false statements to a financial institution regarding her mortgage. In Tennessee, an explosives manufacturing plant exploded. Multiple people died and several were injured, though exact numbers haven't been released, and 19 people are missing, but it doesn't look good. The U.S. Treasury finalized a currency swap agreement with Argentina of up to $20 billion to help stabilize their faltering currency. First Lady Melania Trump announced that she's been speaking to Russian President Vladimir Putin directly, and as a result, 8 children have been reunited with their families after being separated by the war. Meanwhile, Russia launched another major drone and missile strike on Kiev, injuring at least 20 people and knocking out the power for hundreds of thousands. China announced new trade restrictions on rare earth exports, and in response, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a new 100% tariff on China, which the U.S. stock market did not like. The UK signed a $468 million deal with India to supply them with missiles. French President Emmanuel Macron reappointed Sébastien Lecornu as Prime Minister after he resigned earlier this week. Peru's President Dina Boluarte has been impeached and removed by a unanimous congressional vote due to corruption allegations and rising crime. In India, at least 20 children have died after taking contaminated cold drift cough syrup. A 7.4 magnitude earthquake followed by a 6.9 magnitude aftershock hit the Philippines today, killing at least 7 people and injuring hundreds. And in Gaza, Israeli forces have indeed begun to withdraw to the areas agreed to in the peace deal, and tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians are returning home. Tell me what you think about all of that, and follow me if you give a shit.
Our trade war with China just got a heck of a lot more rocky. This massive essay that Trump just posted on Twitter basically describes how China has been sending letters around the world, basically saying that they're going to impose export controls on each and every element of production that has to do with rare earth elements. As you likely know, China is a major exporter, and one of the key areas that they export is especially around rare earths. It's things like lithium, gold, a bunch of other elements. Obviously, they're not the only country with these kinds of things, but they have tapped into them. They have the most infrastructure that can actually exploit those deposits. The rest of this post is Trump basically just saying, like, I'm not cool with that at all. And at the end of this post, he says that he is going to start increasing massively U.S. tariffs on Chinese imported goods and potentially other measures. And on top of all of that, he says that he was going to meet Xi Jinping at APAC in South Korea here in 2 weeks. Now he says he doesn't feel like there was a reason to do that at all. And as you can imagine, the market does not like that news at all. Now, before you freak out, let's put this all into perspective. This is the market really so far this year. This little dip here is whenever the market was initially reacting to Trump's first round of tariff talks and in establishing tariffs around the world. And then it basically just rebounded. And you can see that it's up 13.2% already on the year. And this little dip right here, boop, that's today. Now, having said all of that, everybody believes that the market is incredibly inflated, largely buoyed by tech and AI stocks. So, and it really just takes like one little thing to trigger what a lot of people are concerned about being a mass sell-off that could eventually crash the economy. And I'm not saying that that's what this is going to be, but one of the key areas that it would potentially be would be a massive trade and logistics disruption between the US and China, the world's two largest economies. So buckle your seatbelts, kids, because this could be spicy.
The trade war between China and the United States is escalating. In April, the United States announced it would impose additional tariffs on Chinese ships docking there, effective October 14th. 2 days ago, the Chinese government announced retaliatory tariffs on American ships docking at Chinese ports, equivalent to 8 times the US dollars amount. This includes not US-made and US-flagged vessels, but also vessels in which US shareholders hold more than 25% of the shares. This makes it impossible to circumvent sanctions by controlling third country shipping companies. Meanwhile, China has not purchased a single dollar of US soybeans this year. Argentina recently temporarily waived its export tax for 2 days, allowing dozens of Argentine soybean ships to depart for China during this window. Regarding soybeans, China has demanded that the US remove its so-called fentanyl tax and views soybean purchases as a retaliatory measure. Will the trade war between China and the United States continue to escalate? Will it last until the end of the Trump's term?
This is the reality nobody wanted to face. China has leverage we don't. They control 90% of rare earth mineral processing. They're the world's manufacturing hub. And they've been diversifying their trade partners since 2018, specifically to prepare for this exact scenario. Meanwhile, American farmers haven't sold a single dollar of soybeans to China this year. Not $1. Argentina temporarily waived export taxes just so their farmers could rush shipments to China during a 2-day window. That's the game now. While American farmers sit on rotting inventory waiting for a deal that isn't coming, other countries are filling the gap. And here's the kicker. Those relationships China's building with Brazil, Argentina, other suppliers, they're not temporary. They're long-term contracts, infrastructure investments, new supply chains that don't include us. You can't just win back a customer you spent years alienating, especially when your competitor is offering better prices, more reliability, and less political drama. This trade war doesn't end with a handshake deal. It ends with permanent restructuring of global trade, and America on the outside looking in.
If you thought inflation was bad now, wait until you hear what the president just did that can make it a lot worse, a lot faster. Right now, China just put new limits on the metals they export. These metals are called rare earths. These are tiny minerals used in phones, cars, computers, hospital machines, and even military equipment. Instead of calming things down, Trump went on Truth Social saying there's no reason to meet with China's president. And that meeting was actually scheduled to ease tensions. He's now threatening a massive increase in tariffs on Chinese goods. He's basically saying he's ready for another trade war. Now here's the problem. China controls nearly 90% of the global supply of these materials. If this continues, and especially if Trump keeps escalating, China could respond faster and tighter, cutting off even more exports. And that means that the impact will definitely hit us sooner. So let me make this very clear. This affects everyone. Your phone and laptop. Rare earths power your speakers, screens, and chips. Shortages mean higher prices and delays. Your car, especially hybrids and EVs. The motors need rare earth magnets. Prices rise. New cars get delayed. Your home energy. Wind turbines, solar panels, smart thermostats. These all rely on these materials. Energy costs go up. Hospitals, MRI and diagnostic equipment, they depend on them. Delays or cost jumps mean slower repairs or fewer machines. And our military, jets, missiles, satellites, these all require rare earths. If China speeds up its export bans because of Trump's threats, our defense contractors may literally not get parts in time. That means fewer planes built, delays in weapons, and ordinary Americans, workers, families, taxpayers, we foot the bill. So when Trump threatens tariffs, it's not just a social media post. It's a move that could speed up China's retaliation, raise prices, and weaken what keeps us safe. If this keeps spiraling, we won't just feel it in our wallets, we'll feel it in our national security, and that's something every American should care about.
Let's talk about what rare earth minerals actually are, because this matters more than people realize. These aren't luxury items. They're in everything. Your smartphone speaker uses neodymium. Your laptop screen uses europium and terbium. Electric car motors need dysprosium. MRI machines require gadolinium. Fighter jets use samarium. China doesn't just mine these materials. They process 90% of the global supply. Even minerals mined elsewhere get sent to China for processing because they've spent decades building that infrastructure. And now, export controls. China's saying we'll decide who gets these materials and how much. So when politicians threaten 100% tariffs and cancel diplomatic meetings, China responds by tightening their grip on resources we literally cannot function without. This isn't about soybeans or steel anymore. This is about the materials that power modern civilization, and we just handed China the leverage to dictate terms. The response should have been, invest in domestic processing, build relationships with alternative suppliers, negotiate diplomatically. Instead, social media threats and tariff escalation. When you're dependent on someone for critical resources, you don't pick fights, you build leverage. We did the opposite.
Trump obviously didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize today, one, because he's never solved a conflict in his life, and two, because the submission deadline for this year's nominees was January 31st of this year, only 11 days after he took office, and he definitely hadn't done anything up to that point. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why he's real mad at China about a decision that he doesn't understand. Some very strange things are happening in China. They are becoming very hostile and sending letters to countries throughout the world that they want to impose export controls on each and every element of production having to do with rare earths, and virtually anything else they can think of, even if it's not manufactured in China. We'll stop there. Just a little background so you know how wrong he is on this already. There are 17 recognized rare earth minerals. China earlier this year put export restrictions on 7 of those, and then today they imposed an additional export restriction on 5 more of them. So that does equal up to 12 total. There are still 5 that they're not putting any export restrictions on. So when he says anything to do with rare earths, which again, he doesn't understand what that is at all, he doesn't know what he's talking about. We'll continue. No one has ever seen anything like this, but essentially it would clog the markets and make life very difficult for every country in the world, especially for China. We'll stop again. If you don't know, rare earth minerals are used for a bunch of technologies, computer chips, semiconductors, but also used in weapons. So China putting export controls on this is just saying that they're going to restrict how much they send to a country based on that country's intended use of the rare earth mineral. So they are not going to be hurt by this at all. In fact, they're going to have more tight controls over their distribution of something that can be used to make weapons that can be used against them. So from a national defense perspective, this is actually very beneficial to China. We can continue. We have been contacted by other countries who are extremely angry at this great trade hostility, which came out of nowhere. Our relationship with China over the past 6 months has been a very good one, thereby making this move on trade an even more surprising one. I have always felt that they've been lying in wait, and now, as usual, I have been proven right. I don't know what he's talking about when he says our relationship with China has been great over the past 6 months. In the past 6 months, we have had tariffs on China of 145%, and only through more negotiation have we got that down to 30%, which is still extremely high. And oh, by the way, that's still money you're paying. China doesn't pay that. That's money you pay to try and get less Chinese products shipped into the United States, which we're able to do so much because we're extremely wealthy, and it's beneficial to both countries for us to import from them because we don't have low-wage manufacturing jobs at the same level that China does. We tend to rely on services in this country for the mass amount of our GDP, which is still leading the world, which should show you that we should continue to focus on services and not go back to low-wage manufacturing. But again, he's just claiming that we've had this great relationship and this came out of nowhere, and he's proven himself right.
Here's what's really happening. A fundamental misunderstanding of how global trade works. The claim is China's putting export restrictions on everything related to rare earths. Reality? They restricted 12 of 17 rare earth minerals. 7 of those restrictions were put in place earlier this year. This isn't sudden. This isn't out of nowhere. China's been telegraphing this move for months. They're protecting their strategic advantage, which is exactly what any country would do when facing economic hostility. But instead of acknowledging that, we get claims of betrayal and surprise, like China was supposed to just sit there while tariffs piled up and diplomatic relations deteriorated. Here's the thing about international relations. Actions have consequences. You can't spend years treating a country as an adversary and then act shocked when they stop cooperating. China saw the tariffs, they saw the threats, they saw the territorial ambitions being broadcast, and they made a rational economic decision. Protect their leverage before it's too late. This isn't China being aggressive. This is China responding to aggression with the only tool they have that America can't easily counter. And the wildest part? Claiming we have monopolies to match theirs at a 2-to-1 rate. Our biggest exports are aircraft and petroleum. That's not a counter to rare earth control. That's not even the same game.
But he's basing that on the fact that he's saying that they're now putting export restrictions on everything rare earth when they're only putting it on 12 of 17 rare earth minerals, and 7 of those they placed earlier this year. So this is not out of nowhere. This next section, you don't need to hear the whole thing. It's just a bunch of drivel, but he says China's holding the world captive and they're starting with magnets. I don't know what his obsession with magnets is. And then he says that they've amassed a monopoly position, but that the U.S. has monopolies too, and that he just hasn't played that card yet because he didn't feel that he needed to yet until now. The next section, also, you don't need to hear the whole thing. I swear this thing is very long. He's saying that they sent a very detailed explanation of why it is, and he doesn't understand why President Xi is doing this, but that there's no longer a reason for him to speak with him, which does lead in the next section, which I will read. I was to meet with President Xi in 2 weeks at APEC in South Korea, but now there seems to be no reason to do so. The Chinese letters were especially inappropriate in that this was the day that, after 3,000 years of bedlam and fighting, there was peace in the Middle East. I wonder if that timing was coincidental. So from articles that I've read, these export controls aren't going to take place until December 1st of this year, so there is still plenty of reason for him to go and meet with President Xi. But again, he's just trying to increase hostility between countries because that's all he knows how to do, because he thinks that gives him more power domestically for him to intimidate these foreign countries. So that is what he's doing. And then this whole thing about him ending 3,000 years of unrest in the Middle East, a situation that he clearly does not understand and also has ended nothing, is just a very weird, odd statement for him to make. The next section, he just says if China doesn't stop this, he's going to have to counter it financially, and then says for every element that they have been able to monopolize, we have 2. Again, he says that it's every rare earth mineral, which is 17 of them. So what are the 34 that we have? Because our biggest exports are airplane parts and petroleum and oil. So I'm not sure what he's talking about there. He then goes on to say, I never thought it would come to this, but perhaps as with all things, the time has come. Ultimately, though potentially painful, it will be a very good thing in the end for the USA. One of the policies that we are calculating at this moment is a massive increase of tariffs on Chinese products coming in the United States of America. So again, because China has decided to bolster their national security, he's going to tax you more. That's all he's saying here. I mean, really, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And him even saying the only thing that may be potentially true is that this is going to be painful. It's going to be harder for us to manufacture weapons, to manufacture electronics, things like that without these rare earth minerals. And if he continues to be hostile to the countries and does not form some sort of relationship with China, then they're going to exclude us from the people that they're willing to export to, which will make it cost even more for us to get our hands on these materials, especially considering that China digs up 60% of all rare earth minerals and then also processes 90% of all rare earth minerals in the entire world. So they do actually have a monopoly, and we have nothing to counter this. And finally, he says, there are many other countermeasures that are likewise under serious consideration. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. So just to summarize that whole thing, he doesn't know anything about rare earth minerals. He doesn't know about restrictions that China previously put in place. He doesn't know about restrictions that they're putting in place now. He thinks it all has to do with magnets. He says that we also have monopolies over all of these things. In fact, we have monopolies at a 2-to-1 rate to China. If they don't back down, we're going to have to reconsider.
Let me summarize this entire situation in one sentence. We're in a trade war with our biggest supplier, and we have no backup plan. That's it. That's the strategy. China processes 90% of rare earth minerals. They make a massive portion of our electronics, medical equipment, and consumer goods. They're the second largest economy on Earth. And the plan is, threaten them until they cave? That's not strategy. That's hoping the other side blinks first. Meanwhile, China's been preparing for this. They've diversified their customer base, built relationships with other suppliers, invested in alternative markets. They saw this coming and planned accordingly. We didn't, and now American businesses are paying double in tariffs. Farmers can't sell their crops. The stock market's having daily panic attacks. And consumers are about to see prices spike on everything from phones to cars to hospital equipment. The people who voted for economic nationalism are learning a harsh lesson. You can't decouple from the global economy just because you want to. Not without paying a massive price. And that price? It's not being paid by China. It's being paid by the small business owner, whose tariff bill just doubled. By the farmer who can't find buyers. By everyone watching their retirement accounts shrink. Economics doesn't care about your politics. It just cares about numbers. And right now, the numbers aren't adding up.